Snow eats the sound on the Stormlight Trail. Wind scrapes the pines and pushes a white veil across the cutbank. Riley Hart leads 3 rangers in single file. Probe poles, avalanche transceivers, radios clipped high. Her breath clouds the mic. "Spacing, 30 meters," she says. Boots squeak. The slope to their right rolls into a narrow bowl. The left drops to a creek choked with ice. They pause at a test pit. Jonas reads crystals with a loop. Facet layer, weak. May marks it on a slate. Riley scans the cornice above them. New snow, wind slab, a subtle drum underfoot. She notes it, but the clock says push on. Out of the timber, a moose steps into the trail. Massive, dark, a healed notch on the left ear. It plants itself broadside, head high. No bluff charge, no retreat. A raw, hoarse call tears through the bowl and comes back in broken echoes. Riley raises one hand. Stop. The moose holds the line and swings its head toward the run-out zone, then back to them, twice. Snow settles with a soft whump. Riley swallows, lifting her palm higher. Hold. 30 seconds later, the slope ahead fractures top to bottom, a sheet of white turning to teeth. Riley Hart doesn't chase storms. She measures what they leave behind. 3 winters ago, an avalanche swept her and 2 partners off a service road near Rogers Pass. She survived in an air pocket in a pine well, 21 minutes under the snow, counting her breaths and the clicks of a failing transceiver. Since then, she's come back to Mount Revelstoke, not to tempt fate, but to wire the mountain for truth. Snow depth, wind load, weak layers, and the small warnings people miss when forecasts look clean. She is 33, steady-voiced, with a scar along the jaw from a probe strike during her rescue. By day, she coordinates patrols and installs remote weather stations. At night, she rewinds helmet cam clips, cataloging pre-failure sounds. A hollow drum, a soft whump, a crow's sudden silence. Riley believes the mountain talks. The hard part is getting people to listen before it shouts. This story follows that bet. That listening, to sensors, to field notes, to instinct tuned by repetition, can keep hikers, skiers, and road crews alive. It also asks a thornier question Riley can't file under equipment. What do you do with a warning you can't explain? Locals call the moose Kira, a cow with a healed notch in her left ear. She drifts the tree line above the Stormlight Trail when storms stack up. Loggers say she shows up after barometer swings. A guide once filmed her standing stone still on the access road for 8 minutes, then stepping aside right before a loose slide dusted the ditch. No one calls it magic. They call it curious. Riley writes the name into her field book anyway. Kira. If the mountain keeps a ledger, maybe this animal reads it a little faster than they do. Here's what happens when Riley decides to read with her. Base camp is a rented maintenance shed at the park boundary. Diesel heater, plywood tables, a rack of shovels and probes. Riley tapes a simple map to the wall and writes Stormlight in block letters. Jonas, the geologist, is lean and restless, his notebook a grid of grain types and shear scores. May, data tech, keeps the radios labeled and the batteries warm in a cooler. Outside, a windsock snaps. Inside, a kettle ticks toward boil. The plan is simple. 3 days to audit the Stormlight Trail after back-to-back storms. Daylight windows are short. Riley divides the route into 5 segments: creek crossing, timber bench, choke point, bowl, ridge cut. She pairs each segment with a task: dig, measure, log, move. We stay disciplined, she says. Spacing, eyes up, call the small stuff. They nod. Habit more than ceremony. They walk the routine. Test pits every 200 meters. Hand shear tests. Temperature gradient. Riley watches how the surface crust fails and how the slab settles. She listens too. Boots squeak, wind hum, the low whump that means a weak layer is collapsing somewhere out of sight. She writes the time and wind direction next to each sound, an old compulsion she doesn't argue with anymore. In quiet moments, the gap shows. Jonas offhand mentions a climbing partner who didn't duck fast enough last March, then goes still. May runs a glove along the dent in Riley's helmet cam and doesn't ask. Riley keeps her eyes on the line they're tracing through the trees, measuring every pause. She trusts the work, but she remembers the dark. 21 minutes counting heartbeats, air thinning, a pine trunk against her cheek. That memory sits behind everything like a second horizon. Local chatter filters in on the handheld. A logger turning back on a side road because the tree line feels wrong. A guide postponing a tour. No one is dramatic about it. Riley circles the notes anyway. At dusk, they inventory gear and log their readings. Snow keeps falling in small, steady flakes. The shed door thumps when the wind shifts. May sets the kettle back on, and for a moment the only sound is the soft breath of the heater. Tomorrow they move higher, toward the bowl and the ridge cut, toward the place where warnings come late if you're moving too fast. By mid-morning, the sky lightens to a flat pewter. On the timber bench above the creek, Jonas points to fresh impressions stitched along the trail's edge. Tracks big as dinner plates, the dew claws faint but clear in the powder. Moose. The stride is deliberate, angling against the wind. Riley kneels, gloved fingers hovering over a print. The left edge shows a tiny crescent where a healed notch would brush the snow. She doesn't say the name out loud. She writes it in the margin. Kira? They push to the choke point and dig another pit. Facets glitter in the weak layer, angular, unbonded. Riley taps the column and the slab slides at the second hit. She logs the score, photographs the shear plane, then looks uphill. The bowl is quiet, too quiet for this much new load. Dusk pulls them back to base. The shed creaks when gusts slam downslope. May downloads weather station data. Jonas graphs wind direction and speed. Riley syncs GPS and marks the track line where the prints began, then opens the audio from her helmet cam. Static. Heater hum. And under it, somewhere outside, a long, hoarse call that rises and breaks like torn fabric. 9 seconds. Then again. Then again. It's echo, Jonas says without looking up. Wind in the timber. Maybe, Riley answers, setting a waypoint on the bearing where the sound seems to originate. She draws a thin pencil line from the choke point to the lower corner of the bowl. Snow taps the roof in a soft, steady metronome. At 05:10, they shoulder packs and step into blue light. The cold bites harder. Riley keeps the waypoint cued on her handheld. The arrow tugs them along the tree line where the tracks reappear, fresher now, edges crisp. The line stops at a drifted berm above a shallow gully, then turns broadside across the trail. Prints planted, angled toward open slope. Feels like a roadblock, May says. Riley studies the gully. Fracture lines spider from a buried rock. She feels the paws settle in her legs. Hold the line, she says. We reassess here. Riley marks the berm with survey tape and a quick pit. The slab fails on isolation. Q1 shear. Clean. Fast. She logs the temp gradient. 8 exceed at 10 centimeter, 14 exceed at 40 centimeter. Jonas notes wind transport from the northwest and sketches a loading zone above the gully. May plots all three on a tablet map. The picture isn't dramatic. It's a stack of small risks pointing the same direction. They hike a short loop to grab comparative audio. Riley places the handheld recorder on a snowshoe, mic shielded from the wind by a buff. 2 minutes rolling, she says. Boots creak. Pines hiss. Then, far off, a hoarse, voiceless bellow. It lands, fades, returns at roughly the length of a breath taken against cold air. Echo, Jonas says, but he doesn't write it down this time. Back at base by noon, they split tasks. Riley requests the last 10 days of radar returns from the Highway Ops Unit. Low resolution, good for spotting snowfall bands. Jonas exports wind and surface temps from the ridge station. May syncs GPS tracks and overlays Kira's prints where they found them, tagging each with time and snow depth. Riley drops the audio into a waveform editor. She lays a marker at each call. Intervals hover between 7 and 9 seconds, clustering when wind speed ticks up. She checks barometer, finds a quick fall coinciding with the densest cluster. She sends a clip to a wildlife biologist she knows from a training. Cow moose call? Unusual cadence? The reply pings, yes, cow. Cadence odd for mating. Could be agitation, displacement. Cows respond to pressure shifts and ground-borne vibration. She prints a one-page brief. Observed correlation between Kira's presence, calls, and unstable features on Stormlight Trail. Bullet points. Fresh tracks at choke point. Broadside posture angled toward loaded slope. Repeated calls increasing with gusts. Clean shears. Barometer drop. She stops short of calling it evidence. She writes indicator instead. Jonas pushes back with restraint. We can't weight an animal's behavior the same as a compression test. He taps 3 pits that didn't fail catastrophically. If we close the trail on instinct, we lose credibility. Riley doesn't argue. She circles the gully on the map. We don't close it, we shift our plan. She adds 2 tasks. Install a portable geophone near the berm and set a time-lapse camera at the tree line. No bait, no lures, just a wide frame pointed where Kira crossed. May programs a geofence in the GPS. If any of them drift within 30 meters of the gully, the unit chirps. Before dusk, they return to plant the instruments. Snow ticks. At the tree line, broad tracks arc in, pause, and turn. Riley measures stride length, chest height against a spruce scar, and the distance from the last print to open slope. She stands, meeting the quiet. Indicator, she says. We treat it like one. They start before dawn, headlamps tunneling through ice fog, gear checked twice, shovels, probes, trauma kit, bivvy, extra batteries. Riley adds 2 portable geophones and a spare camera trap. Jonas carries the snow saw. The plan is simple. Log 3 pits above the berm, plant sensors, and clear the bowl by 11 miles. At the timber break, Riley sets the first geophone. May calls coordinates. Jonas stamps a flat pad with his skis. The instrument seeds a baseline of mountain noise. Riley glances uphill. They move in 30-meter spacing. At pit 1, the column fails on the second tap. Clean shear. Jonas notes propagation potential and scratches a diagram none of them like. Short window, he says. Riley nods and revises the route. A higher traverse under thicker trees, away from the gully's mouth. As they angle up, the forest opens. A shape lifts from the edge of the trail. Massive, dark, breath-printing white. Kira. She stands broadside, not threatening, simply occupying the line they intend to take. Her ears splay, then cant toward the bowl. A hoarse call empties into the cold and comes back in broken pieces. She steps 2 paces downslope, stops, and looks back. Distance, Riley says. Automatic. They hold 20 meters. No approach, no food, no noise. Riley draws a small circle with her hand. We'll yield. Kira turns along the tree line, the contour of Riley's revised route, and moves with the unhurried purpose of something that has done this before. They follow parallel, separated by trunks and shadow. Human line mirroring animal line. The geofence chirps when Jonas drifts. May tugs him back. At pit 2, the saw bites through the column. Third tap, collapse, a slab letting go of a bed surface like glass. The geophone logs a pulse. May tags the time. We're done above the berm, Riley says. Sensors only. They plant the second geophone near a leaning spruce. Kira watches from the break, head turned so one eye holds them. When the instrument starts, she lowers her muzzle to the snow, smelling, not feeding, and gives one short call. Jonas wants one more data point, for confidence. He edges toward the gully lip to photograph a crack pattern. The geofence chirps again. Riley says his name once. He doesn't hear, or chooses not to. 2 steps more and the surface under him slumps. A shallow slab tears free and carries him 5 meters downslope, where a buried log catches his thigh. He yells, pain, not bravado. Protocol snaps tight. Riley anchors a belay to a spruce. May radios a hasty line. Minor slide, 1 caught, conscious, no burial. Riley stays high, tests the snow with her pole, moves only when it answers. Jonas's face drains. His leg is wedged but not broken. They dig from the side, keep weight off the hang fire, use the saw to free a wedge. 10 minutes becomes 20. The slope holds. Through it all, Kira stands at the tree line. No closer, not gone. When Jonas is clear and sitting, she steps once across the human track and stops again, blocking the direct exit toward the bowl. She turns her head to the darker line under thicker trees. The gesture is small. It reads like a nudge on a map. Riley makes the call. We take the tree line out. No more pits. Jonas doesn't argue. May logs the decision, clips the spare camera to a trunk, angles it across the break where Kira crossed. They move. Kira moves too, keeping a steady offset until the forest closes and the grade lessens. At the last opening before the road cut, she pauses. Riley stops, breath quiet. Kira gives one final low call, less warning than release, then slips between spruce. Back at base by 10:47, the geophone traces tell the story in dots and dips. The ridge loaded, the weak layer answered, their route bent where an animal stood. They return to the tree line an hour before dusk to retrieve the spare camera. One clean job left. Wind drops to a hush that makes every movement feel louder. Riley asks for spacing at 20 meters and keeps her pole tips high. She follows their morning track until the spruce open into a shallow pocket of light. Kira is there, not in the trail, not blocking. She stands offset in the trees, broad chest half-shadowed, nostrils feathering steam. The notch on her left ear is stark against the pale. No foot stomp, no snort. Just stillness so complete it edits the forest. Riley lifts a hand and sets it at shoulder height. Stop. May freezes, eyes wide. Jonas lowers his phone without being told. Riley angles her body to present less. Gaze soft, chin tucked. The way the training says you let a wild thing read you without pressure. She counts her own breaths to keep time. Kira turns her head, giving Riley one eye. The pupil is glossy and dark, ringed by winter lashes. She tips her jaw a fraction toward the root under thicker trees, the safer line they took because of her. Then she brings it back, settles, and holds. Air bends. It's that quiet. Riley doesn't talk. She doesn't reach. She lets the information land exactly as offered. Distance, direction, permission to pass. She slides the camera off the trunk by feel, never breaking the line. Her boot squeaks once. Kira's ear flicks and stills. Okay, May whispers, almost nothing. Riley answers without sound, just a small nod. One, slow, deliberate. Kira mirrors it, or maybe it's the weight of her head shifting as she breathes. Either way, the exchange is complete. They back out by the same path, turning only when the trees take Kira out of view. No swagger, no story told into the radio. Riley logs the time, the distance, 19 meters, the way the animal's posture read as clear, calm, not feeding. And she writes one line beneath it. Listen first, move second. The weather window collapses by mid-afternoon. Forecasts had promised a quiet 6 hours. The ridge ignores the promise. Wind veers north. Spindrift lifts from the cornice like smoke. Riley is midway through tagging samples when district emails an order. Retrieve the high camera on the bowl face before dark. Budget, vandalism risk, liability. The subject line is worse. Non-essential equipment must be cleared. She reads it twice. We can leave it overnight, May says. Jonas traces a line on the map. 20 minutes in and out if we cut across the apron. We have a clean track. Riley studies the geophone trace. Small spikes riding a steady noise floor. Not panic, not yet. She keys the radio. Stormlight team copies directive, assessing route. They kit back up because in uniform the line between caution and refusal is thin. Spacing tightens to 15 meters. The sky goes dull steel. Riley keeps them under trees until the last switchback, where the forest opens to the bull's apron. Kira steps from the timber. She isn't in their track. She is across it, front legs planted, neck high. A hoarse call rolls across the apron and shreds on the far wall. Riley lifts a palm. The team stops. The geofence chirps when Jonas drifts. He corrects without comment. "Another route?" May whispers. "Back under spruce," Riley starts, and District cracks over the radio, a clipped reminder. Jonas flinches. He points at the camera on its post, an easy angle shot if they cross the apron now. "I'll grab it and meet you in the trees." Riley steps into his path. We hold. The mountain answers. A soft whoomp slides underfoot, a settling sound. Kira's head cuts toward a convex drift that looks smooth until you see the belly. She takes 2 deliberate steps downslope and stops, between Jonas and the apron, broadside again, angling him toward shadow. "Jonas," Riley says. "Back to me." He shifts his weight. Pride and protocol fight on his face. He's been the skeptic for 2 days and doesn't want to be the liability now. 2 minutes, he says. "It's nothing." It's not nothing. Riley angles her body, offering a retreat that saves face. We hold. Wind throws spindrift like a veil. Sound thins. Jonas moves, toward Riley, then sideways toward the camera, then finally back. When he clears the line Kira has drawn in air, she eases her stance. No triumph, just the math of the moment resolved. They tuck under the trees and radio district. Route unstable, delaying retrieval. The reply is tone first, word second. Riley logs reasons, wind loading, whoomp, animal agitation, without making Kira the hinge. She knows how thin that would read on someone else's screen. Dusk shuts down color. Snow starts as powder and turns to needles. At 17:20, the geophone pings a low-frequency surge. 5 minutes later, the bowl goes. An audible crack like a silenced gun, then a white wall sliding slow and huge, gaining voice as it fans through the apron. It runs long, piles hard, and sends a powder cloud through their old tracks. Where the camera was, there's nothing. Silence holds. Then the forest exhales. Riley raises the radio and finds no sentence that isn't, "I told you so." She settles on, "Debris field established. No personnel involved." They can't hike out. Highway Ops closes the road for control work, and the safest option is a bivvy in the timber. They dig a trench, rig a tarp, fire the stove low. May reads numbers off the logger to keep her voice from going small. Jonas wraps a foil blanket around his bruised shin. Beyond the tarp edge, a hoarse call comes and goes at intervals. Not alarm, not duet. A check-in. Riley hits record and sets the handheld near the trench rim. She writes in the dim, "We stayed because we listened." Let that be lesson, not luck. They keep watch by turns. Snow ticks, trees creak. The mountain holds its counsel, and for once, so do they. Highway Ops lifts the gate at 07:10. A patrol sled noses from the timber, 2 techs hopping off. Jonas waves it off, no fracture, just a bruised thigh. They convoy to base, skis strapped, radios quiet. Inside the shed, workout runs talk. May pulls geophone cards and sets them downloading. Riley tapes paper to the wall and draws a timeline. Wind veer 1538, first soft whoomp 1602, district order 1611, Kira blocks line 1619, retreat 1624, infrasonic swell 1720, release 1725. Jonas adds his near miss in the same ink. 1 small square marked caught. The traces say what their legs felt. A low band rises before the bowl fails. May overlays barometer and ridge wind. Loading outran bonding. Riley circles the 55 minutes bought by a single pause, time between Kira's stand and the slope letting go. Decision margin, she says. Not luck. Margin. She emails the package to the Canadian Avalanche Centre and copies Dr. Asha Patel at Wildlife Conservation Society Canada. Attached, audio of hoarse calls, the clip where Kira enters, turns broadside, and holds, plus the geophone swell minutes before the crown breaks. Asha replies, "Behavior suggests agitation or displacement. Cows detect pressure shifts and ground vibration. Site fidelity likely. Treat it as a correlative indicator, not proof." That's the lane Riley wants. She sketches a pilot in 2 tracks. Channel A, geophysical. Pair geophones with a weather node. Compute an instability index from infrasound, wind, and temperature gradient. Push a color advisory, green, amber, red, to patrol radios. Channel B, behavioral. Mount 3, no bait cameras at the tree line. Classify frames by simple rules anyone can audit. Moose present. Broadside hold, downslope step, neutral transit. If any cow holds broadside within 200 meters of a start zone for over 90 seconds during an amber geophysical read, bump the advisory 1 color for 4 hours. Rule 3. Never approach or haze wildlife. Treat an animal blocking a line as an obstacle and reroute. They backtest the idea. May tags 3 past storm cycles with documented slides. In a guide's old vlog, a cow with a nicked ear stands on the access road 8 minutes before a loose slab dusts the ditch. A logger's dash cam shows a dark mass pacing the tree line the evening before a wind slab peels above the same bend. Not courtroom sure, pattern sure. Jonas builds what he trusts, a scatter of presence probability against instability index. The points are noisy, but a contour emerges. Cow appearances stack 12 to 36 hours before peak risk. He circles false positives in green. We'll stand down sometimes for nothing, he says. I can live with that. Riley writes the standing order. When Channel A is amber, and Channel B flags a broadside hold inside 200 meters of a known start zone, suspend non-essential tasks, choose treeline routes, log rationale, notify district with geophysical data, do not cite behavior as sole cause. She posts it and briefs every ranger. In 9 patrol days, the pilot trips amber 4 times. Twice, nothing moves. The note reads held route, stood down 1400. Once, a small storm slab drops overnight. No one nearby. The 4th time matters, an advisory uptick at 11:42 as a school group unloads snowshoes. Riley redirects them to a forest loop and posts a ranger at the gate. At 15:10, a short slide rakes the apron and buries their old approach thigh deep. No drama, just the absence of it. The pilot feels sober, workable, and repeatable for this valley. That night, Riley freeze frames Kira at 19 meters, ear flicked to wind. Under it she writes, indicator respected. Lives unchanged, on purpose. 3 months later, the valley wakes to another storm cycle. Wind howls across the ridges, and a white curtain seals the peaks from view. The dual-sense system has been running quietly all winter, its sensors stitched into the slopes like small, patient witnesses. Most days it hums green. Today at 10:14 a.m., it blinks amber. Riley is in the control hut, coffee cooling by the keyboard. May scans the feed. Geophone's picking up a low band. 12 hertz and dropping. Jonas, healed and back on duty, checks the overlay. Pressure's falling too fast for comfort. Then Channel B triggers. On the camera near the Stormlight tree line, a dark shape steps into frame. Broad chest, narrow muzzle, the familiar notch on the left ear. Kira. She stops, angled across the trail, breath rolling in visible bursts. The classifier logs, broadside hold, duration 112 seconds. The advisory shifts from amber to red. Riley doesn't wait for district confirmation. She radios out. All field teams, suspend travel past marker 7. Evacuate lower campgrounds. Repeat, evacuate. 2 road crews and a group of volunteers are already halfway up the switchbacks. They get the call, turn around, and start back. The last truck clears the apron at 12:06. 10 minutes later, the ridge fractures. A crown line half a kilometer wide releases in slow motion, then thunders into white chaos, burying the road in 20 feet of debris. Inside the hut, seismic plots spike, alarms stutter, then silence. May exhales first. We caught it. Riley leans on the desk, eyes fixed on the live feed. The frame fills with blowing snow. When it clears, Kira is gone. Only the outline of spruce and a ragged edge of light remain. District calls back 30 minutes later. Excellent decision window. The system gets a provisional name, Stormlight Protocol, and funding for a wider rollout. No one mentions Kira on the paperwork, but every ranger in the valley knows who the first responder was. At sunset, Riley drives to the overlook above the trail. The slide path is already hardening into shadow, a frozen wave. She kills the engine, listens. Far below, a single call rises and breaks against the ridges, low, rough, and certain. She writes a final note in her log before heading down. Red advisory issued at 10:20. Evacuation completed 12:06. No casualties. Unconfirmed wildlife observation. Cow moose, same corridor. Behavior consistent with prior events. Riley adds one last line beneath it, quiet enough to stay between her and the mountain. Warning heard. Guidance taken. The valley exhales as winter thins. By late March, the Stormlight Trail is a sawtooth of shade and bare ground. Debris in the slide path has frozen into a rough boulevard, broken trunks, wind-polished blocks. Crews mark a new summer route that skirts the runout. The protocol shifts to shoulder season settings. Radios go quiet in the way that means work has mattered. Riley hikes the overlook on her day off with a thermos and a pair of field glasses. She stays on the official path. A wooden stake reminds visitors of the closure line with a bright tag and a phone number for reports. The sign they commissioned went in last week. Stormlight Trail. Listening saves lives. It's plain cedar, not a monument. She settles on a rock outcrop and scans the tree line where the cameras once watched. Snowmelt threads the ditch. The spruce tips are flushed and sticky. Movement lifts at the edge of shadow. A moose steps from cover, ribs broad under a winter coat that hasn't sloughed yet. Left ear, notched. Kira. Riley doesn't stand. She doesn't wave. She lifts the glasses only long enough to confirm the ear and the heavy muzzle, then lowers them to keep the moment from narrowing. Kira is not alone. A small figure moves where her legs part the brush. A calf, last year's size, winter slim and alert. It stays half a body behind, copying its mother's stop and look. Kira angles to the old corridor, pauses exactly where the geofence chirped months ago, then moves parallel to the tree line. No call, no broadside hold. She isn't warning, she's traveling. Riley watches the distance, 40 meters, then 50. The calf tests a shallow drift and hops it, legs awkward and sure. At the bend, Kira stops. She turns her head the way she did in the quiet, one eye to the open, one eye back. The pause is clean. The calf stacks behind her. For 2 beats, nothing moves but breath. Riley feels the old urge to say something into the air, to narrate a thanks that would flatten what happened. She lets it pass. Kira tilts her jaw a fraction, almost the weight shift of a nod, and steps into the trees. The calf follows. Branches close. Sound returns. Water under crust. A distant crow. Riley pours a finger of coffee and caps the thermos. On her way down, she checks the cedar sign for loose screws and wipes a smear of mud off the number. At the last switchback, she looks back at the tree line and sees only shade and the clean line of the closure stakes. That's how it should be. The trail marked, the lesson kept, the animal gone to its life. Freedom respected, not possessed. Some warnings arrive loud, crowns and cornices, sirens and red bars on a screen. Others arrive as a breath in cold air, a body turned sideways across a path, a pause that buys time. On the Stormlight Trail, listening changed outcomes without anyone becoming a hero. A cow moose lived her life. A team did their jobs. People went home. If you travel winter country, carry the basics and the humility. Check forecasts, read advisories, move with spacing, turn back when the small signs add up. If you see wildlife acting strangely, holding a line, calling, pacing a tree line, do not approach, feed, or haze. Give distance. Reroute. Report observations to your park or provincial hotline. Treat behavior as an indicator to reassess, not an excuse to chase a story. Support the folks who keep the quiet work going. Local search and rescue, highway ops, avalanche centers, and wildlife scientists. Respect seasonal closures. Obey trail signs even when they look like overkill. The measure of a good day in the backcountry is that nothing happens. Our thanks to the professionals who informed this story and the protocols it reflects, including the Canadian Avalanche Centre and Wildlife Conservation Society Canada. Any errors are ours. Freedom isn't a gift we give the wild. It's a boundary we keep. The trail is still there. The trees still hold the wind. Somewhere beyond the line, a dark shape moves without needing us. This is Paw Prints and Stories. Stay gentle. The wild remembers.